Alright, so I'll be discussing the top culture shock moments from my experience in Japan. Now this will be including general things and also specific events. So this list is going to be kind of all over the place. I'm going to try to get through it quickly. Number 10 and 9, I'm kind of clumping these together. I'm going to call it nuanced culture. Japan has a very nuanced culture, and that's the word for it, because there are some things that you'd expect to be one way because of your knowledge of Japan and Japanese people, but then their customs dictate it's the opposite, and you're like, what? I'm confused. Part of that is like, Japanese people are very, formal, but then like, slurping is common, and that's how you show you enjoy food. So now slurping is like a bad habit that I picked up because I got used to slurping in Japan, despite, their
slurping.
Their clean and very formal way of being. Don't worry about it. You're good.
You can edit that out.
I'll leave it in.
Beep me out, like. Doop.
No, because then the subscribers, they're like, what did you beep out? And then,
really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw those comments when they got.
Yeah. A lot of things are like that, where you'll think it's one way and then it's the other way, because that's just how the culture works. Language plays into this a little bit, because me as an American, if you speak English to me, no matter how slow or how much you pause between words, I'll still understand what you say. But in Japan, that's not the case at all. There's kind of like a rhythm to their speech, and if you don't nail that, that's like an additional component that you gotta get if you're trying to communicate. And that's something I did not understand at all. So I'd be confused when people didn't understand me. And that's just part of their culture. It's just this sing-songy way of speaking and this formal way of acknowledging each other. And there's a lot to that. Something else that I thought was confusing initially was sexuality in Japan. It's this thing where like, as Americans, we think of Japan and we think of like weird sex stuff. But I went there and like, not a trace to be seen, It was like everyone was super modest and dressed modestly. My whole time there, I didn't see like one scantily clad person. And I was like, huh. But then at the same time, like, at the convenience stores, they have adult magazines, like, up against the windows. And, like, onsens where people shower naked with each other are common. And you're like, this doesn't line up, but it's just the nuance in the culture. And that's what it takes time to learn and understand. And that's what I was really shocked by. The next thing on my list about culture shock things, this is kind of like a minor thing, but in comparison to the United States, I found that people in Japan were extremely polite and cultured, like worldly, not in like a secular way, and just like a knowledgeable of global events and occurrences type of way. A lot of people asked me for my opinion on American politics. It's very ethnocentric for me to be like, well, duh, cause America's the superpower, blah, blah, blah. But they'd ask me like, oh, and why, what part of the United States thinks this way? And why do you think that is? Is it because of economic level or whatever? And I was like very surprised by the complexity of their question and of their understanding of the United States. And it's not just the United States, they know Japan and the rest of the world similarly. Also, they're super polite. Like, as a foreigner, I had a lot of experiences where I had to, rely on the kindness of strangers, kind of in a sense. For someone who understands the plight of immigrants in the United States, I understand that it's not easy for, things to, get your questions answered sometimes in the US, that people can just instinctively be rude and that's their right, that's how they feel. And even more so in other countries, like countries in Latin America where I visited, you're gonna have a harder time being a tourist and having some type of confusion without being taken advantage of. So going to Japan, I expected this to be the case, but it wasn't at all. People saw politeness as just like, you have no option, like, they're a human being with feelings. Like, why am I going to be rude to them? Of course I'm going to help them. My parents raised me right. And I was just like, when people explain themselves like that, I was like, dang, wow, way to go, Japanese. Jeez. So that left me in shock. Not in a bad way, though. Number 7. I've mentioned this in another video, but I was surprised by how safe everything was. I mean, not that, things are, like, dangerous or post-apocalyptic in the United States. I mean, not yet. But, in Japan, it was extremely safe, and I'm not saying that lightly. Like, I never once felt like I was in danger or threatened by another person. Just in general, people, like, don't leave their bikes locked or, like, stuff like that, where people just let their guard down because no one's trying to hurt anyone, and I was really surprised by that. Number 6. Something that was a big culture shock was greeting people in Japan. Now, going there, I had heard that bowing was common, but you don't quite get it until you're there. Still, the first person that I met, I instinctively stuck my hand out to shake hands with them. And they gave me a look of confusion. And it was awkward. The people who did shake my hand, which was very few, didn't know how to shake hands. And it was awkward because that's not their culture. And it's funny because I taught them like how to shake hands and what it meant, and like you gotta shake it firmly and twice and be affirmative, and a lot is said by a person by their handshake, blah blah blah. There's like the typical bow when you greet someone, which is like 15 degrees, or if you're being thankful or whatever, where you like just kind of lean your back forward like 15 degrees forward, and I didn't know that. So the first person that bowed to me was in a bank when I was changing my currency from dollars to yen. They completed the transaction and then they bowed to me, and that was the first time someone bowed to me. So I bowed back, but lower than them because I didn't know the protocol, and I was like, well, like, if I'm bowing lower than them, then it's polite, right? And then they just looked at me uncomfortably, and then they bowed lower than I bowed the second. So then I was like, oh no, I gotta bow back lower. And then we were just in this standoff. And that's not the case. Just like a simple, like, short thing like that will do, and that communicates that.
Wait, so what does it mean if you bow lower?
If someone's really sorry, I've seen that happen where they'll just like go all the way down.
I know it's like, I shouldn't use anime or shows as an example for culture maybe, but there was a time where this guy took out this girl for a date, but they were past curfew, and the dad was like really upset. So then the guy got like, he bowed really low. I was like, no, I'm so sorry, it was my fault. Like that's what I thought of.
Yeah, I would think that in that situation, that's how it would play out.
But, yeah, like,
and also like in the bank, or like if you're in a place where people are serving you, and maybe it's something where it's like, maybe it's like a fancier place or a pricier place. I've seen people bow lower, but in general, it was just like a simple thing. Yeah, like a quick. And, yeah, and that's something that I have like reverse culture shock now, because like I'm used to bowing for like in a formal situation. So like I'll finish talking to my professor and then bow and walk out, and I'll be like,
but that's cool. You should stick to that.
Yeah. So another thing,
bow?
I mean, I'm not standing, so this is like my.
Stand up. I want to see.
Well, they're not gonna see
okay.
it, but like it's just my crotch. This isn't gonna work. Like, I'm the wrong person to ask. Like, I just learned it from watching. So, that's how I learned it, though. The number 5 thing that gave me complete culture shock, and this might not be the case for my UK viewers or some of my European viewers, but the way that people drive on the left side of the road. You think, like, Josh, that's such a dumb thing. Once you learn that fact, it's ingrained in your brain and life continues on. No, because when you've lived your whole life in societies that drive on the right side of the road, anytime you cross the road, you look in a certain direction and you're like, no cars are coming, let me just walk. And you looked in the wrong direction because you're in Japan and they drive on the other side of the road. And that's something I knew, but like I didn't know, you know.
Something that I knew, but I didn't know, you know?
You know, but like,
you know.
Irregardless, so,
Gosh, that's just, get out of the house.
See, something else on that note is that train stations. In my head, I picture the train on the right is going that way, the train on the left is going this way, but it's reversed because it's Japan and people drive on the left side, and that. So I would constantly get on the wrong train platform, especially the first month I was there.
Weren't you there like 2 months?
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Number 4, culture shock. Okay, so now we're getting into the more specific experiences that were just like blew my mind. And one of those was my visit to Nara. It's a city neighboring Osaka. It's very famous for a large temple that it has and a very large population of deer.
Yes! I still have that picture of you.
Yes. I took a lot of awesome pictures chilling with deer, and these deer are super used to humans. They don't care about you. You can walk right up and pet them, but they don't care about you unless you have food. If you have a couple crackers or whatever, forget it. These deer will be all up in your business, kind of nudging you, maybe biting at your shirt, or like maybe almost standing up on their 2 back legs to get, you know, a little bit of that cracker action. And it's kind of cute, kind of scary. And
wait, so how are they? usually fed? Because it's not like a park, right? So it's not like there's someone taking care of them.
Well, there are people that sell crackers for like people who come through.
But they can't just live off of crackers.
Well, there's also like grass and like, you know.
Okay, so they're just like adapted to the environment?
It would be like squirrels at a park times 100. Like, they were everywhere.
So they're like adapted to the environment.
Yeah,
so
and I think the reason, I'm not sure about this, is that they were revered by Shinto culture as like deities, or like in that sense. So like no one hunted them and they don't have any natural predators. So the population just grew to the point where there's like deer everywhere that are used to human.
Cool.
And and they're like super chill. So like you can walk right up to them, get a pic in their face.
Them?
Like I didn't ride any or see anyone riding any. But something you need to know if you're gonna visit Nara, which I highly recommend, not because just the deer, but there's also the huge temple that I was talking about, Todaichi, I believe it's called. Amazing experience. One of the largest wooden structures in the world, but there's poop everywhere. So, like, watch out. I stepped in some. It was awkward. Another culture shock was food. Bless you.
I thought it was going to be
food. Yeah. I'll just say the American version of Japanese food is very different from the Japanese version of Japanese food. There was a lot of things that I had never heard of, and I tried for the first time when I was there. There was even like crazy food too. Like I had quail in my time there. I had stingray. I had like fermented soybeans, like all kinds of crazy stuff that I would never even think that I would try. I'm glad I got the chance to, you know, get a taste. The most bizarre thing that I ate in my time there was when I was at a restaurant with friends and I flipped through the menu and literally half of the page said in big letters, raw horse meat, and it had a picture. And I was like, what? And all of my friends were like, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? And I was like, are you kidding me? Raw horse meat. Raw horse meat. Are you kidding me? And I like had a thing where I was like, what? This is crazy. And they bought it for me because they saw how emotional of a reaction I was having. And then I ended up trying it. I didn't like it. It was really cold and chewy. But it wasn't weird at all to them. And along that same note, they're like, yeah, I've eaten whale before. Yeah, I've had this. It's not weird. And whereas food like that is completely taboo in the US. So yeah, that was a culture shock. Number 2. The onsen. That's the Japanese bathhouse, which is common for people to just go and spend their time with their friends and family, relaxing. It doesn't sound odd, but when you realize that everyone there is naked, it adds a layer of uncomfortable feelings, especially to me, an American. So from my perspective, this was one of the biggest culture shocks of my experience. But if you want to hear more about my onsen experience, check out my video right here. But the number 1 cultural shock experience that I saw in my time there was the Maid Cafe. I cannot begin to explain. It's like another world. Let me try to describe it to you. A Maid Cafe is a cafe where the employees are dressed as maids. And that seems really odd to an American person, me, especially with the context. Well, I'm looking at it through the goggles of, well, the only restaurants like this in the US are like Hooters or like Wing House, and it's like, there's like this undertone of like, sexy women, hot wings, get them both at this restaurant. So I figured like, that this Maid Cafe would have like some sort of weird sexual undertone like that, but not in the slightest. It was pure cuteness off the charts. It was the cutest place I have ever seen in my whole life. The walls were lined with like polka dots and ribbons, and the menu items were like ice cream in the shape of a bear, and like you got souvenirs that you could take, and they were like animal ears, or you can get a photo with the maid. It's like stepping into another world. Literally everything you see is kawaii. Cute, super cute, totemo kawaii. And it wasn't weird. It was weird that it was cute, but it wasn't like sexual. Like it wasn't sexualized. They gave us this cup of ice cream shaped like a bear, and then we sang a little spell to like, you know, to make the food cute and then eat it. They had a performance, and there was a little stage with a disco ball, and there were lights, and they were singing and dancing to this super cute Japanese techno song, and it was like another world, and that was the biggest culture shock. Like, I was just stunned for the next 3 days. Yeah, those are my biggest culture shock experiences, things that I didn't know before going to Japan that definitely left an impression on me. Let me know if you've been to Japan, or what kinds of things left a big impression on you. Let me know your thoughts on any of these things that I talked about as well, and make sure to subscribe for more Japan content and stories and all kinds of stuff. And you'll just see awesome cities, and that in combination with like the new and the old. Jesus! In this video, I'll be discussing
No, friends, usually
So the brother next to you,
So it's like,
surfing on a
waiting for silence.